Now, without further ado, I will introduce Elaine Massa, who is a master gardener. She is an expert as they come on any kind of plant. Whenever I have a question, I call Elaine. She has a jungle in her house. You can ask Fred. All winter long, he lives in a jungle, the poor guy. And it really is amazing to see the plants that she can grow from any little seed. If I happen to come across some little seed or something, Elaine can grow it for me. And then she brings all those plants outside. She has amazing gardens, and I've heard her speaking on the radio. And I'm sure she has a million other credentials that I don't know about, but she didn't tell me because she's very humble. And she's also my very good friend, and this is Elaine Massa.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen. And thank you all for coming out. As Karen said, it's a very hot night. And so, I wasn't sure anybody was going to come out. So, the topic is war gardens. When Carolyn and I were talking about, she asked me if I would give a talk to the Historical Society, and I thought, well, gardens, my passion, historical gardens, historical war gardens, came up with that. And there's a little book over there that was written in 1918 called War Gardens, which is a really fascinating book if you get a chance to look at it. So I thought, okay, I'm going to talk about war gardens. So when you talk about war gardens, there's war gardens and victory gardens. War gardens was the term used in World War I. And after the war was won, for World War II, it was then called a victory garden because, of course, it was going to be a victory anyway, so it led to victory in the First War, so let's just call it victory garden now. Now, most people do think of World War II when they think of the victory gardens, but in fact, there were quite a few programs and quite a bit of activity in World War I in the war gardens. Now, Great Britain, Canada, and US were where we usually think of war gardens or victory gardens, but in fact, gardens and working in gardens was all over Europe and anywhere because people had to eat. And when I talk about this, it's mostly government-sponsored programs. It's what I'm referring to. So, types of war gardens. The government in their propaganda made everyone know that it was their patriotic duty to have a garden and to grow your own vegetables. And so people in the cities would have window boxes or patio boxes where they grow tomatoes or herbs or something. At least they were doing their part. And most people think of war gardens or victory gardens, they think of the backyard gardens where the person had their backyard, they plant their vegetables. But there was also the vacant lots where people would take a vacant lot. The funny part about that one is that oftentimes the government would actually discourage people from using vacant lots, especially in the city, because most likely there was all kinds of trash in the vacant lot, and the soil would be terrible, and they were discouraged from using it because it would actually be a waste of resources, a waste of seed, and a waste of time. So, although vacant lots, on one hand they'd say, use any land you can, but don't use that. So, it was used, but not always successfully. And then community gardens. Community gardens are where, like, town would say the town green. They'd turn over the town green to people who wanted to farm. Maybe they didn't have their own land, so they'd turn it over, and people would each get their little plot and work a little plot to have shared community gardens. And then estates. Now, estates primarily was in Great Britain, where you had these huge manors, and they would turn their gardens, some of their beautiful ornamental gardens, into vegetable gardens. And then, of course, farms. Now, farms technically aren't victory gardens, but they did play a part in the war, played a part in the agriculture and the feeding of the people. So I do include it here in talking about the victory gardens. So when the government put out their pamphlets or their propaganda, what were the reasons for war gardens? Well, prevent food shortages. Food would win the war. They tried to emphasize that people would feel better because the food would be more nutritious. It was fresher and better for them. And staples, they canned foods would go to the soldiers. And in fact, canned foods became rationed during the war. And saving money by not having to buy food. They fresh air and exercise. And the relief transportation system, shipping costs. That way, you know, the gas was being rationed. And so the amount of transportation or travel of foods was, you know, they wanted to cut that down. So if people grew their own, they wouldn't need to ship in on food. And the major reason was the morale, was to give people the belief that they were involved. There's a sense sometimes of being removed from the war, removed from the front. And so this gave people a case of being involved in the war efforts. So these are a couple posters. I'm sorry, it's a little bit yellow. We're having, you know, with the projector. It's but I think you can get the idea. The first poster here was actually before World War I. And there were food shortages even before the war. And the Food Administration was actually trying to get people at that time to preserve or to conserve food, and trying to get people to be more concerned about waste and using just what they were going to eat and not throwing away a lot of their foods. And notice the patriotic look, the attempt to be like the spirit of '76, and the most of the posters had a real patriotic sort of theme to them, so that people would feel like it's my duty. This right here is a picture of a community garden in Queens, New York, from 1944. I don't know, I just think it's interesting. So I'll start with World War I in Great Britain. Now, Great Britain's an island nation, so it's easy for them to be cut off from all the merchant ships which would come in to bring foods. So food is an extremely important part of the war effort, because without them getting involved in creating war gardens, there would be, and there were, food shortages. These war garden initiatives started in 1917, and they didn't implement rationing until 1918, which was a mistake in that they had some severe problems with food shortages during World War I. Over 1 million allotments, meaning plots of land that were assigned for people to grow their own food. And in World War I, the British government started the Women's Land Army, which was extremely vital in women doing farm labor for all of the men who had been sent off to war. The women took over and pretty much became the farm labor. And without them, there would have been even more food shortages. And here's a couple of, the first picture is from Great Britain for World War I. The second one is actually a US one. And if you notice the canned vegetables, fruit, and the Kaiser too. And if you notice on the middle can, it says Monarch brand unsweetened. And these are some Women's Land Army posters, again, from England or Great Britain. And the idea of the women are doing their part. Now, in the U.S., in World War I, there were 3 major national campaigns. The first one was the National War Garden Commission. And it was started by Charles Lathrop Pack. He was a wealthy timberman from Ohio. And he got together with heads of various universities and women's organizations, and they started this National War Garden Commission. It was loosely associated with the American Forestry Department because that's where he had connections, but it had no funding from the government at all. It was mostly his money that went into this, and the whole purpose was to the posters, leaflets for information and education of people on how to grow gardens. This was primarily geared towards the individual gardens or the community gardens. It's estimated in 1917 at $350 million in produce from the backyard gardens. And then in 1918, $525 million. Now, part of that is because there were more, but the other reason, and in fact the reason that's been attributed to the increase, is that 1918 was the start of daylight savings time. And it was believed that the daylight saving time is actually why there was that much of an increase over 1 year. Notice the patriotic. I don't think you can get any more attempt at it. And you notice the Charles Lathrop Pact. Any of the World War I National War Garden Commission posters have his name on it. Now, the book that I mentioned over there, War Gardens from 1918, these are a couple things from that book. Now, he talks about if you're going to do a community garden, that's about 3 acres, and you're going to divide it up into 50 plots, each about 50 by 50, 50 square feet. And you would need fencing in order to keep out cats, dogs, small boys, and other undesirables. And so you build this fence, it's 2x4s, chicken wire, barbed wire on top, and for this whole fence, it's $112. And then you divide this into your 50 plots, and so the fencing, and seeds, fertilizer, and you share equipment among all 50 people, it comes out to about $11 each. Good deal. And your crops obtained would be about $34 worth of crops. So you're actually at $23 profit. Sounds good, doesn't it? Then he goes on to say, well, for an individual, if you're going to have your own garden, the tools you would need: a spading fork, an iron rake, a 6-inch hoe, the atomizer for spraying, and a watering can. And all of those will cost you $4. And the recommendation was the easiest things to grow would be bush beans, beets, Swiss chard, and tomatoes. So the second program is the United States School Garden Army. Now in 1914, the Bureau of Education created the Office of School and Home Gardening. The idea was to have a curriculum where they teach kids, especially in rural areas, in urban areas, to teach kids about gardening, to teach them where food comes from, how to grow food, and where food comes from. It was, the program was adopted in the Northeast and in California. It was very successful in those areas, but it was not widely adopted across the United States, and it was actually pretty much a failure. But in 1918, with the war effort, the Office of School and Home Gardening got taken over by the Department of Defense, and they used their budget to promote this curriculum. They wanted to teach children thrift, industry, service, patriotism, and responsibility. The enrollment was estimated at 2 million. Now, as we know, somebody can enroll, and that doesn't mean they're going to have these great gardens. But the curriculum included teachers who were supposed to go and do home visits and actually teach the parents, make sure everyone knew what they were doing, and check on the gardens throughout the summer. It was actually quite involved. In some areas, took it very seriously. They had competitions and really got into it. And at the end of the war, since it was part of the Department of Defense, the end of the war meant the end of the budget. And so the school army went away, but it did lay the foundation for 4-H clubs for the future. Here are a couple of the posters. You notice the Victorian looking and the size of those kids. I don't think they're doing much really. Although their baskets are quite impressive, I think. But again, that Victorian sort of look. Now here's a couple more. I like the little boy with the tie. I think, I always see people with their baskets full of the tie. The first picture here is considered a unique poster for that period for the school gardens. And it's the only one that has enlist now. All the other ones are, I raised it myself or showing production, and this one is more of a enlist and a join. The girl is not dressed typically, like the other kids with the tie, and she actually looks like she's working.
We have a total like that right at the end of the workbench.
Yeah.
It's sort of hidden.
Like that. We actually have one at home. Yeah. We use it. And the other thing about this is, which I wouldn't have noticed, but the short hair. At that time, a girl with short hair was unusual, and to actually show that in the picture was something, a bit of a different. And the third program was the Women's Land Army of America. Now, the Women's Land Army in Britain was very successful and certainly needed to run the farms. Now, in the U.S., it was part of the women's suffrage because women still didn't have the right to vote, and so it was women who were wanting to show equal rights and wanting to prove that they were able to do what needed to be done. They were the ones that actually organized the Women's Land Army of America. And they were called farmerettes, which I think is pretty funny. But it was all done because it was organized by local and state levels. There were only 20 states that adopted the Women's Land Army of America. Yukon was one of the premier states getting involved in it and providing the education. One of the things that the Women's Land Army of America did is they required women to get some kind of training. They didn't just take, somebody out of the kitchen and throw them into the field and say, good luck. They actually put them through a 2-week program usually it's the land-grant university, and they would teach them various farming things they needed to know, some dairy farming, chicken, all sorts of things, so that whenever they put them out and placed them on various farms, they actually knew what they were doing. Now, that training, though, cost $10 for a 2-week course. So that would preclude a lot of women from being able to do it because that's quite a hefty price. And that the pay was not enough to really make up for it. But they had about 20,000, usually middle-class, urban and suburban women did join in the Women's Land Army of America. Notice the lovely uniforms that they wore. And then, yes, these were their uniforms. This first one is a New Jersey poster, and the second one is from the University of Virginia. And this actually, the University of Virginia one, is about the training program, and although the tuition is free, board was the $5 a week, so it's still costs you the $10. But again, that very patriotic, and Uncle Sam, really, you were doing your duty. So we move on to World War II. In Britain, at the time World War II started, they were importing 2/3 of their food. So having all of their merchant ships cut off is a huge problem. And so they actually started rationing earlier this time. In 1939, they had 815,000 allotments, and by 43, they had 1.4 million allotments. The Dig for Victory campaign is one of the largest. In fact, it's kind of the iconic Victory Garden campaign. They had 26 leaflets. Each leaflet would be about a particular subject that it would talk about. Maybe it was about seeds, maybe it was about fertilizers, maybe it was about preserving foods, collecting seeds. They had always giving information. The nurseries, which everyone thinks Great Britain and their flowers, and they love flowers, but at the time, nurseries were not allowed any more than 25% of their stock could be flowers. The rest had to be vegetables. And estates had to replace their lawn and the ornamental gardens with vegetables. There's one of the anecdotes was the lord of the estate asks his butler what's for dinner, and the butler replies, "Well, the cook tells me that we're having spuds from the tennis lawn and lettuce from the croquet court." Now the Royal Historical Society did allow some exceptions to this, scrap everything, plant gardens. And the Rothschild's orchid collection and some ancient topiary gardens were saved from this. But the funny, there was one estate that they didn't touch. They wanted it to be left exactly the way it was pre-war, so that it didn't look suspicious. Now, I don't know about you, but if one is left, it does look suspicious. But anyway, that's where they held all their military camps. There in this one estate that was left alone. I don't know. Now, also in Britain, they did a lot of relocating of kids from the cities, because the cities had a lot of bombing, so they moved kids from the cities out into the countryside, and they would incorporate the gardening and farms work into the curriculum for the kids. So it was actually just part of their routine, and they made it into like special times whenever they'd all get out to the garden, and it became just part of their routine. But they had no weather forecast. Because they didn't want to give the enemy, to let the enemy know what the weather was going to be, to give them a heads up. So they would never broadcast the weather. And for anybody who does gardening, I mean, that's something you really want to know. But they had no weather forecast. And fertilizers became impossible to get. And so they had to get very creative. One garden area used street sweepings from London. They would sweep the streets, put it all into a cart, take it and use that. And they said it smelled quite terrible, actually. Others used hair. Hops fertilizer was used, and something they called night soil. That's what they called it, night soil. Do you know what night soil is?
Yeah.
It's human waste, I'll say. They used anything that they could because regular fertilizers were not available. And now Cecil Middleton, I don't know if he was one of the first garden talk shows. Extremely popular, the beloved, the quintessential garden host in Great Britain at the time of World War II. And he had to change his talks from flowers to gardens. And he one time said, he could never love an onion the way he loves a dahlia, but he talked about the vegetables and everything that he had to, and he became the voice of the Victory Gardens. And he did help to boost them around, and people would listen to his broadcast. And again, the Women's Land Army, again, was used in Great Britain, and it was, for the most part, it was successful. One of the problems that the women had is that oftentimes people, farmers, would expect them to be out in the fields and then come in and do domestic duties as well, you know, because that's what they expected. And so that could be a problem. Also, facilities were not always adequate. You know, some farms, they wouldn't even have enough beds for each person, and they'd have to sleep in shifts. There were all sorts of reasons why it was not always successful, but it was not necessarily because of the women not being able to or not wanting to work. But it was, overall, it was definitely a success, the Women's Land Army in Great Britain. This is the poster, the Dig for Victory poster, that is the, like I said, the iconic poster for Victory Gardens. And this is just another one of the Dig for Victory posters. So now we move on to the U.S. World War II. For the food production, here, the agricultural food production, 75% of it stayed in the U.S. 13% went to the soldiers, 10% went to the Allies, and 2% went to others. I don't know who others are, but the U.S. was feeding the Allies as well, and it was necessary. And so part of the propaganda was that we are the breadbasket of the world, and that was part of the World War II propaganda. In 1943, it was estimated there were 18 million gardens, 12 million in the cities and 6 million in the suburban and rural. But that's individual, that's the war gardens for people in their backyards. This does not include farms. So that's why you're going to see more in the cities and less in the rural areas. And in 44, it was 20 million gardens, 8 million tons of food. And it was estimated that Victory Gardens produced 40% of the vegetables, estimated $4 million. And at the time, sugar, butter, milk, cheese, eggs, coffee, meat, and canned goods were all rationed. So it really made sense for people to have their own gardens and grow their own. It was necessary. So now, the first line here, and I don't know, it's pretty much every vegetable you can think of that you want to grow in your garden. The ones that are underlined, beans, beets, carrots, lettuce, peas, and tomatoes are the most common ones. That's what is recommended most of the time for beginner gardeners. But all of the other ones are the vegetables that were grown in home gardens or Victory Gardens. Now, kohlrabi and Swiss chard were introduced to the American plate during this time, and actually World War I also, because they were easy to grow. And that's when they became more popular during this time, because they weren't really a part of the American diet prior to the war gardens. And part of what the war garden effort was is that they hired these home demonstrators. Now, home demonstrators would go to people's homes and talk to the people or the women about how to conserve food, how to prepare different ways to prepare the vegetables, conservation, how to can things, and they were doing basically home training and education services, and that was part of the whole war garden. It's just part of the war garden commissions. It's believed that, or not believed, it was the canning supplies quadrupled between 1943 and 1944. People were all, wanting to do canning. And this part is, although it's sort of, Earl Tupper created plastic items from the byproducts of oil refineries. He had worked at DuPont, and somebody had given him some extra the byproducts, and he was invented some plastic that wasn't brittle or breakable and could be reused and was nice and light. And it was used in 1940. It started really in 45. It was used in various places for utensils and bowls and things like that. And later, of course, Earl Tupper patented Tupperware. And like I said, it's not really, War Gardens, but I thought I'd throw it in because I thought it was interesting. Now, the War Food Administration got Boy Scouts and Campfire Girls involved by providing them with stencils with Hitler and Hirohito's faces that they were to take and put on garbage cans. Now, originally, when I first saw it, I thought, because they're garbage? No, the idea was that every time you're throwing away garbage, you are feeding them. And the idea is every time you're wasting food, you are helping the enemy. And so the Boy Scouts and Campfire Girls would paint these stencils on garbage cans. So you have to give them the jobs too. These are some of the slogans from the war campaigns. The U.S. is the breadbasket and arsenal of democracy. Food fights for freedom. Raising food is a real war job. Bread is ammunition, as vital as bullets. Food is a weapon, don't waste it. And of course, the call to farms. Now, here are a couple of posters. That Saturday Evening Post, that's a common, the magazine. Now, this one, from 1941, shows this casual approach to gardening. And then that one is a more realistic approach, or, statement about gardening. That's from 1943. An interesting note here is 41 it was 5 cents, and then 43 it was 10 cents for the magazine. Now, shoot to kill. Protect your victory garden. One of the insecticides commonly used at that time was DDT. Now, obviously, don't know if that's what she is using, but more propaganda anyway. And this poster over here is actually an advertisement for a seed collection, the Victory Garden collection. And it's only $1.60, and there's 16 different seed types, different seeds, 2.5 pounds of bean seeds, 3 different kinds of beans. It's enough for a 2,000 square foot garden. And beans, corn, carrots, tomatoes, peas, 16 different vegetables, all for $1.60. But, all the seed companies, fertilizers, they all kind of got into, the whole marketing. And of course, oftentimes in these posters, they portrayed the women as very kind of naive and innocent, and how proud she's, so proud. Good men. So then, Women's Land Army was actually, in 1942, the government started, the Department of Agriculture started the U.S. Crop Corps. And it was to get farm help. And it included the Victory Farm Volunteers, which are teenagers from age 11 to 17. They did not implement the Women's Land Army until 1943. There was a lot of pushback, and the government didn't want to have the Women's Land Army. Connecticut had already established the Connecticut Land Army. It was same people who had worked to put it together in World War I. They were still very active. They put it together, and in fact, in in like less than 8 days' time, the Connecticut Land Army was able to get women to go to a farm in Bolton and pick 50,000 quarts of strawberries in less than 8 days' notice.
50,000?
50,000 quarts of strawberries, yes.
That's a lot of strawberries.
That's a lot of strawberries. And that's kind of testament to the activity of the organization that the women then, the Women's Connecticut Land Army at the time. Now, it's estimated that about 5 to 6 million enlisted men from the farms were off to war. And so from the farms, of course, they needed to be replaced. The government brought in migrant workers, POWs. They would often do furloughs for farm workers to come home during harvest season to work on the farms, or conscientious ejected. And as I said, it wasn't until 43 that they actually started the Women's Land Army program, but they kind of left it up to the states. So they gave the directive and some money, but each state could run it the way they wanted to. So some states, very progressive, and other states didn't really do much of anything. But it was estimated that 600,000, generally young, white, middle-class, single, and urban women were part of the Women's Land Army. And in New York City, the Women's Voluntary Service and women's clubs, or the YMCA, they would go down to Macy's in New York or B. Altman's and stand out with their tables and recruitments and get people to join up. And it was all, that was all the women were volunteering to get the recruitments. And that was one of the reasons why the Women's Land Army was as successful as it was in many of the areas. One of the reasons, in different pay levels, different parts of the country, in New England, kind of the way it is now. In New England, you know, $70 a month. In the Southeast, you make $31 a month for the same work. They did have uniforms, denim overalls, blue shirt, blue jacket, and cap, but it cost, you had to pay for it, and it cost $10.05. And most of the women didn't bother with it. They did get an armband that gave them some identification, but most of the women, now they did provide, if you wanted to be a little more feminine when you're out in the field, you can buy a wraparound skirt instead of the denim overalls if you prefer. But because of the fact that the Women's Land Army was kind of left to the states to decide how they were going to run it, every state reacted in a different way. California and the West Coast adopted the Women's Land Army. It was as if, you know, didn't miss a beat. Same with New England, didn't miss a beat. In the Midwest, well, in like Montana and Wyoming, where they have a lot of the cowboy-type activities and a lot of big machinery, they just would not use the women for any of that activity. They did allow them for some of the truck crops and some of the mining work. They called them like reserve labor, and they allowed some seasonal work, but didn't really use them. Many of the areas in the Midwest, like Iowa, North Dakota, South Dakota, they were very hostile initially, didn't really want to use them, but then kind of got to a point where they really needed the help. And there was sort of this attitude of, well, urban women, you know, they're going to be afraid to break their fingernail, and they're not going to be able to do it, you know, one day they're going to want to go home, you know, they're not. And so there was definitely a prejudice against the urban. And in some of the states only would take women who had previous experience, would not take like an urban woman who wanted to do her part. Some of them, they were, in some of these recruiting areas, they'd tell these women, you know, oh, well, spend your vacation, your 2-week vacation, spend it on the farm, fresh air. I think they oversold it a little bit as far as what they were really going to do. Some of them, like for college students, it was great, you know, during their summer vacations, they were extremely helpful and very successful in most of the places where they were hired. And in the Midwest, when they hired them, usually like the second year, they would bring the same people back, and by the third year, there was no difference. The Midwest was very accepting of the women after they initially got over the initial hostility. The South, on the other hand, different story. Like Arizona and New Mexico, they were fine with bringing Mexican labor and had no need for women in their workforce. But in the South, there's the class, gender, and race all played a part. It was okay for African American women to be out in the fields, but white women didn't belong in the fields. And they would not accept, if a white woman was out in the fields, then, they just wouldn't see it. They were not accepting of that at all. And it was considered only emergency labor. And in South Carolina, when they did start the Women's Land Army, only white women could get hired because they didn't want to give the impression that this was something that the African American women were going to do, because then it would be, if you let one in, then the white women aren't going to want to do it. And it was a really odd mix of the way that the whole Women's Land Army was perceived. And in fact, they ended up doing more labor exchange, where this farm person would work on, they'd all come together and work on this farm, and then they'd all work on this farm. And the Women's Land Army was not used as much in the South as it was the rest of the country. And here's a couple more posters. This one is from the volunteers, the farm volunteers. These are the kids, the teenagers. And this is the lovely couple who are going to be out on the farm for the summer. And the women, you notice the insignia that says that's and she's got the armband. The other ones have the uniforms in that picture. So, post-war, in Britain, in 1946, the Victory Gardens had pretty much been abandoned, but because of the food shortages, rationing continued until 1954. Now, Black Bay Fens in Boston and Dowling Community Gardens in Minneapolis are two continuously running community gardens that have been running since the war and are still active. In 1979, PBS had a program called Victory Gardens, and it was to promote gardening, backyard gardens, and talking about various aspects of gardening, and I think to try to get people more involved. And I know there's some gardeners in here, and there's a renewed interest in gardens. We have the community gardens over at St. Peter's House here in Hebron, and concerns for fresh food. And there's nothing like a fresh tomato off of your own homegrown tomatoes. And with concerns about GMOs and pesticides and all that, grow your own. Now, there are a few books. There's a few books over here if you want to look at. Some of the ones, there's a copy, a reprint of a seed catalog from World War II, the time period, the prices of bread. And the books there. And any questions? Yes, sir.
This was excellent. But I guess if you go to the context of World War I, there was no air travel, no highway system for transporting food, there was no flash frozen foods at that time. So I guess what we have today seems like, oh, well, that's an easy thing to do. But the times were different for producing food, or even there was no 40-hour work week for the urban workers. So they thought that they could come home after working 12 hours and do this stuff.
Yeah, it's not like you put a seed in the ground and then 2 weeks later you come in and there's a...
Yeah.
It's a massive what do you call it, to try to get people to do this and and again, you know, even the supplies that they talked about, you know, everything is by hand, there's no equipment to do it, you've got to spend a lot of time, and as you say, there's no like fast foods, there's yeah, I think it's hard to kind of put that in perspective, you're right.
And you'll notice that it's all canning. You don't see freezers or freezing of produce anywhere, even after World War II.
Yeah, the pressure canners and the, yeah, all of the supplies. Yeah, I like just freezing things now. That's definitely better, until you have a power outage.
Do you can and freeze produce?
I freeze them, I don't can. Yeah, I'm lazy.
Being from Iowa, I remember canning, I mean, this is part of our culture in Iowa. You, on Sundays after church, you did whatever Grandma said, and that's what we lived off of can. We canned everything. My mom still cans meats and her tomatoes and everything she cans. But it's kept. She can't eat. But at the Iowa State Fair, from way, way back, it's like you bring your canned good stuff, and it's like private or whatever. Judge, yeah. I mean, it's huge. I mean, people get like really excited about their canned goods.
And they make decent award money too for that, probably.
Oh, there's no money.
Oh, there isn't?
No. But it's like,
You can even the president.
it's the prestige. It's the yeah.
What's your split, Elaine? I'm sorry, what's your split between flowers and vegetables?
Me?
You. Oh, okay, thank you.
I will admit, I do mostly flowers because it is really a lot of work to do vegetables. And, you know, between the weather, the insects, and, you know, all of the other things you're dealing with. Now, I will admit that this has given me a lot of incentive, and I'm hoping to do. And my husband, his father had the best garden, so when he retires, he's going to have it.
He's never retired.
You hear that,
And then Elaine will can it.
Yep.
Well, any other questions? I knew Elaine would do a great job. Thank you again so much.